So some OCD extinctionist, and by those terms I mean opposer of Christ's deity, and an extinctionist meaning believes that the soul ceases to exist upon death, and that we must wait for the resurrection to be conscious again. He challenged me to a debate. His name's Antichrist Exposer 77. He wanted me to wanted to have a debate about the notion. Uh, what happens to what is the state of the dead? Um, and I will be taking the stance that the apostolic position is certainly that people are conscious after death. People are experiencing either bliss or pleasure after death. And one story we got to look at is that of the Transfiguration. Now this is Luke chapter 9. Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him, went up to the mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed. His clothes became bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring fulfillment to Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. Now, Antichrist Exposer 77 is going to insist in his rebuttal that it is a vision. And the reason why I don't buy that is because this doesn't have the fingerprints of a vision. I mean, look, Peter and company were very sleepy. They were starting to fall asleep or just beginning to wake up, and all of a sudden, boom, they go into a vision. No, you're not in the process of waking up, and it almost seems like they're witnessing this in the middle of the vision. It's like starting up in the middle. And if this was a vision, what was it? Visions are for a person's benefit. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone that time what they had seen, and I believe it's because Jesus instructs them not to say anything about it. And then, also, Jesus is physically there on this mountain where this supposed vision is happening. He's there. Moses and Elijah aren't really there. So if Moses and Elijah aren't really there, who is Jesus speaking to? He's speaking to people who aren't there. They're talking with Jesus. Why is Jesus speaking to people who aren't actually there? Now Moses is dead and buried in the ground, but this text would certainly seem to indicate that Moses' spirit was still alive and was conversing with Jesus. Next up, 2 Corinthians 2. 2 Corinthians 2:12. This is Paul talking about himself. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up into the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. Paul is entertaining the possibility that this was an out-of-body experience. This is an experience that he had in his spirit outside of his body. Ask Antichrist Exposer 77, if he had such a vision like this, he would have to tell you this happened in my mind while I was in my body, because you don't exist outside of your body. The dead know nothing. As, he uses Ecclesiastes 9:5 to prop up, and we'll get to that in my rebuttal. But anyone who denies that the soul exists, the spirit exists outside of the body, would not make such a statement. Would not say, I don't know whether or not this happened in my body or out of my body. Paul didn't know. Paul was certainly open to the possibility this was an out-of-body experience that he had. Next up, Rich Man and Lazarus. Oh my, have I not ever seen the extinctionists just beat the daylights out of this passage, this text. The Jews of Jesus' time believed in the bosom of Abraham. They believed that the dead were indeed, the wicked dead were indeed in a state of torment. And is Jesus correcting this supposedly hideously false and apostate view of death? No. He's using it to tell a story. And what other lesson can you take from the story other than, if you are wicked in this life, get ready for torment immediately after your death? Now, Antichrist Exposer 77 is probably going to serve up some kind of tap dance around the obvious truth of this passage. And he's, and I'm sure Antichrist Exposer holds that Hades is a place of where it's the grave. It's where the dead simply, are unconscious. Why is it that Jesus says that in Hades, where the rich man was in torment? Why does Jesus say that a person in Hades is in torment? And if this point of view on death is just so pagan and false and this, that, the other thing, why in the world did Jesus of Nazareth, the greatest teacher the world has ever seen, use this without even saying, now, I don't believe this. Now, this is false, but he just takes something that the Jews of his time believed and made a parable about it. Don't you think that would, if you were supposed to believe that the dead were unconscious, don't you think, that would be a little confusing on the part of Jesus doing that? I'll also point out, whatever counter-explanation Antichrist Exposer serves up, I'm going to ask, would an apostle's student agree with him? Because an apostle's student would agree with me. Irenaeus, in I believe Book 2 of Against Heresies, talks about this parable by Jesus as an example of how, what it is like for people after they die. This guy's 2 putts away from an apostle, and he agrees with me. And that leads to my little last bit of argumentation. This is from Tertullian's Prescription Against Heretics. This is chapter 36, and he's telling the heretics out there, look guys, you think what you're preaching is so true? Go to an apostolically throned church. In fact, go to a few of them and see if it's really being preached there. These churches have the apostolic teaching, and you know what they're teaching? They're teaching the stuff I believe, not the stuff you believe. So the heading of the chapter is the apostolic churches, the voice of the apostles. Let the heretics examine their apostolic claims, in each case indisputable. Church of Rome, doubly apostolic, its early eminence and excellence. Heresy, as perverting the truth, is connected therewith. So in other words, what Tertullian is saying is, go see if this kind of stuff is actually preached at the apostolic churches. It's not. By the same token, I think this is a fine example of, something we should do with soul sleep. Did any of the apostolic churches actually preach soul sleep? No, certainly not. And I'll just rattle off, Ignatius of Antioch, where the disciples were first called Christians. Ignatius speaks in his letter to the Smyrnians, chapter 2, of how Jesus raised himself from the dead, just the way the Apostle John wrote in John 2. Clement of Rome, the church in Rome in 95. This is where Peter and Paul ministered and died. In chapter 5 of 1 Clement, the Roman church, writing to the Corinthian church, 2 apostolically throned churches, speak about the fate of Peter and Paul and how they were martyred, left this world, and are now left the world to go to the holy place. And Justin Martyr, who was baptized by people taught by the Apostle John. He, in chapter 20 of his first apology, speaks of, and while we affirm that the souls of the wicked, being endowed with sensation even after death, are punished, that the good, being delivered from punishment, spend a blessed existence, we shall seem to be saying the same things as poets and philosophers. So there's Ephesus, Corinth, Rome, and Antioch, all believing that the souls of people go on to another place after death, and they are conscious. My 10 minutes are up. Talk to you.